Hey everyone, Mike Alton here from the Social Media Hat. I want to take a moment today and have a little conversation about what is going on with Facebook. More news this week, more changes, more impacts for all of us. So we're going to go through it all, and I'll be taking questions, and we'll see what answers we can provide for you. Now, first, quick disclaimer, I also work for AgoraPulse. We'll be talking about AgoraPulse a little bit today. I'm sure it'll come up as part of the discussion because they're a social media management tool. So, of course, they were impacted by this week's changes. And, of course, I don't work for Facebook, so this isn't going to be a rah-rah supporting Facebook necessarily. But it simply I want to be talking about what happened. Now, if you're asking yourself whether you should continue to use Facebook, the whole delete Facebook movement, I'd encourage you to go listen to Kim Garst's video. She just went live a few minutes ago, or Friday morning if you're watching this on replay. And she talked quite a bit about what Facebook means to businesses, why we shouldn't be leaving Facebook, why there isn't necessarily better platforms out there, why we should be taking a little bit of ownership of what's been happening. So I'd encourage you to listen to Kim. But quickly, what we're going to talk about today is what's happened, what has Facebook said, what did they do this week, and more importantly, why. So we're going to talk a little bit about Cambridge Analytica, right? Have to bring that up. And what was the impact, right? What happened as a result of Facebook's changes this week? And then we're going to touch on what you as an individual user, and me personally, why should we care? What's happened? What's this going to impact us? And then as businesses, why should we care? So I'm going to show you the official statement from Facebook. This was published to their blog, to their press room just a couple days ago. Now, some of this we knew was coming. Right. Zuckerberg had made a statement on his Facebook profile a couple of weeks ago talking about what was going to be rolling out over the course of the next few weeks. But a lot of these changes were a complete shock, and we had to kind of roll with those changes. So what you're looking through here is a list of the changes to the API. Now, that's the application protocol interface. That's the mechanism that third-party tools and apps use to access Facebook and allow us to do things with Facebook using a third-party tool. An obvious example is I want to use AgoraPulse or Hootsuite or Buffer to schedule a post. I want to be able to use that tool to post on my behalf. The tool has to have access to the API in order to do that. And there's so many other things that tools can do by using the API. Here's an obvious one right here, the Facebook login. Many of you, no doubt, have used your Facebook profile to log into another service, a website, an app. And so Facebook has gone through and made quite a few changes to these various APIs in order to limit how much data and how much manipulation third-party apps and services can do. But it wasn't pre-announced, so apps could not prepare for this. And in most instances, when we're talking about these various APIs, access to the API was immediately revoked. And the various tools that were using those APIs had to go into their backend, make some changes, and then get recertified. In other words, they had to renew their permission in order to keep using that service. So an example from the AgoraPulse side was that new AgoraPulse users weren't able all of a sudden to add new Facebook pages. That capability wasn't there. They got an error message. So our developers had to go in on the back end and make some adjustments into how we were using the data that comes from a part of this Facebook Pages API right here, and then ask again to be able to use the API. And of course, Facebook said, okay, yeah, you did it right. We're going to let you do that. And Ecamm Live, which is a tool I'm using right now, big shout out to Stephanie Liu for pointing me to this particular app. They had to make some similar changes because of the way that they use things like Facebook login, they publish to groups and so on. So if you want to read through this, I'll put the link in the comments after the show. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but the idea here is events, groups, pages, Facebook login, Instagram, various aspects of Instagram. These were all immediately impacted. And the tools that you and I use every single day, all of a sudden we're scrambling. So that's why you may have noticed some of your favorite tools not working the way you expected. That's why you may have received an email or a chat message or some kind of a notification that such and such functionality was no longer going to work. So that's what's been going on this week. And the one big takeaway that I wanted to give everybody in this particular video was to just be patient with your favorite tool. They're working on it. They're going to figure this out. For the most part, the things that Facebook has done here isn't necessarily a total removal of functionality. It's simply a mechanism to make sure that the tools that are using the desired functionality are doing it in the right way, and they're not taking advantage of that functionality, that access to pull information that they shouldn't be. Groups is a great example. So many of us use tools to publish into groups, to monitor groups, but because of the way the API was created before, access to that API also meant that the tool got access to things like other members and other member information, which most of us don't legitimately need if all we're trying to do is schedule content and be informed of comments and that sort of thing. So that's what's happened this week. The first big question then is why? What is Facebook doing this for? And for that, we need to talk about Cambridge Analytica. So most of you probably saw this article that I wrote a couple weeks ago. And if you didn't see this article, doubtless you saw countless other articles that were talking about Cambridge Analytica and the data that was taken from Facebook. So just some quick background here to make sure we're all on the same page. Back in 2014, a professor from the University of Cambridge began to develop apps on the Facebook platform, not unlike all the other apps that we use. His focus was on quizzes, so the various kinds of psychological quizzes that you might take. Hey, answer these questions and find out which Smurf you would be, or what your elvish name is, or what your business profile is like. So he created quizzes like that gathered information from everybody who took the quiz. And his quizzes also gathered information from the friends of everybody who took the quiz. So as a result of his quiz, he was able to collect data from millions of users and then millions of other users that were just related to that. All of that was somewhat legitimate in the sense that he wasn't necessarily breaking Facebook's terms of service or the agreement that he had as a developer at that point. But what he did next is where the issue lies, and what he did next was to sell that data. He sold that data to Cambridge Analytica. Initial estimates were around 50 million users. Facebook has now upped that estimate to closer to 87 to 90 million Facebook users, mostly here in the US. Their data was probably sold to Cambridge Analytica. Now, what Cambridge Analytica did with that data is still up for some debate. The investigations haven't been finished, but we know from what Cambridge Analytica says about what they do is that they work on political campaigns all around the world, not just in the US, and they use sophisticated trend analysis and big data reporting to figure out things like what would make me get upset about a particular issue and therefore change my perspective about a government, a candidate, an organization, something along those lines. And they use Facebook targeting and other kinds of ways to reach you, to manipulate you. It's psychological operations, it's psychological warfare. And it's done in a way that's not above board, that it's not okay. They use fake news and fake information. So we know that they do that. It's it's on their website. They've been doing this for years. Now, how much of the data they took from Facebook was used in that way, it's hard to say. We don't have that information yet. But we know what's happening. So this professor from Cambridge University sold that data to Cambridge Analytica, then manipulated that data and then put it back into Facebook targeted advertising. So that's what happened. The problem from Facebook's end isn't that necessarily somebody stole the data or purchased the data and sold it illegally. The problem from Facebook's perspective is that, number one, they knew about it shortly after it happened and didn't take sufficient steps to protect that data, to get it removed, and so on. And then, of course, the ongoing issue of apps and API access that's allowing other companies, other third-party vendors, to take data along those lines and use it in manipulative ways. So that's what the uproar is about right now. Zuckerberg's being asked to testify in front of Congress. He's putting out full-page ads. He's getting pressured. There's the Delete Facebook movement, which, by the way, isn't going anywhere. But all of that is coming to a head because people are rightly concerned about how their data is being used. Now, of course, some of that's on us. We do have an internal responsibility to go into our profiles and make sure we're not allowing hundreds of apps to access information that we're sharing on Facebook, that we're not allowing them to access our friends lists and so on, and making sure that we're not putting anything into Facebook that we wouldn't want other people to know. So by that I mean, look at your about, your profile, look at your like activity, your posting activity, those kinds of things, because all that's being monitored, all that's being used in legitimate ways by marketers, and unfortunately illegitimate ways by some apps. So that's why Facebook has taken the rather dramatic step this week of changing almost all their APIs, revoking access, and forcing third-party developers to make changes on their end and then ask for access again, so that Facebook has a much more granular look at who's using their API, and more importantly, why. What are they doing? Who is it? What are the ramifications potentially for how they're going to use that data? So that's the impact of what's happened this week. Now, as individual users, how concerned should we be? And this is totally subjective. I think that we rightly should be very concerned, because what we're seeing now is a, frankly, knee-jerk reaction to years of misbehavior on the part of third-party app developers. Obviously not every app developer, but some third-party app developers. And as a correlation then, it's misbehavior on the part of Facebook. They've known for some time that this kind of data was available, that it was possible to scrape data, to export data, do all the different things that these companies are doing with data. And as a user then, we now have a trust issue, right? And that's something that Zuckerberg is now finally very much aware of. His customers no longer trust Facebook, at least not as much as they used to. And that's something he's going to continue to address as time goes on. My other concern is that we haven't yet heard the worst of what's going on. This week, if you're not using a third-party tool, then okay, there was probably no impact on you. But as the days and weeks go by, we keep finding out more, right? Cambridge Analytica's stash of data went from 50 million to 87 million users. That's a pretty significant increase. And we know from Cambridge Analytica's own homepage that they have data points and data sets on 250 million U.S. voters. That's pretty much the whole population. So they have information on us, and frankly, they're probably not alone. There are probably other companies out there that have been taking that data and using it in, frankly, malicious ways. So that's a concern that I have going forward. Now, as a business, the first concern is the most immediate concern, which is that all of a sudden the things that I want to be able to do stopped working, right? Some of us stopped being able to post into groups. Some of us stopped being able to go live into groups or to a particular Facebook page. And we never want that to be impacted. We're seeing changes in how we're able to advertise, how we're able to direct and target advertisements on Facebook users. And as a business, we hope that the things that we're used to being able to do don't change dramatically. Unfortunately, c'est la vie, as they say. This is social media. This is digital marketing. Things are going to change. Now, you should always be relying on your own content and be relying on tried and true methods of trying to get natural organic engagement so that when things change, the impact on you is as little as possible. And you want to make sure that you're using trusted apps that have actual partnerships with the platforms that you're dealing with. And again, I'll mention Agorapulse because, hey, why not, right? We're a partner with a lot of the social networks, and we cherish that relationship because it allows us to work with them in the boundaries that they want us to work. And it means that if we do what they asked us to do and the way that they ask us to do it, everything's going to be great. And you're not suddenly going to find yourself being unable to use a tool that you're paying for to do what you want it to be able to do. Unfortunately, there are other tools out there that don't have that relationship, that create workarounds, like they ask you for your username and password in order to do something for you on a particular platform. Those aren't partners. Those tools are in breach of the terms of service for that particular network, which means not only are they putting themselves in jeopardy, they're putting your profile in jeopardy. And if we're talking about your business and we're talking about your social profile that's representing that brand, that business, what's the impact going to be if that suddenly goes away? Could be fairly significant. So strongly encourage you to think about that. Look at the tools that you're using. Make sure that they're legitimate partners of the particular networks and that sort of thing. And ask questions. Ask questions of me. If you've got any questions right now, feel free to put them in the comments. But that's what I want to talk about today, and just make sure everybody was kind of aware of why all of a sudden this week things started to break. For the most part, like I said before, it'll be a temporary issue. Many apps have already resolved these issues, like Ecamm came out with an update right away. And as soon as you updated Ecamm, all those issues were gone. But that's what we were looking at this week. And I hope that this has helped you, and look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.